Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we go into the analysis of the important articles from the Hindu newspaper today, a couple of important announcements. Number one, the first class of the Target Prelims 2022 course will be of Indian polity. As you know, the course starts on 30th of April in the evening on the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS at 7:30 p.m. Do join in for that and do subscribe to the YouTube channel of BYJU'S IAS. Also, the complete schedule of the crash course is given in the description of the video. Do check it out and do make a note of the important dates. Also, BYJU'S IAS is bringing to you the National Scholarship Test, which gives you a chance to win up to 90% scholarship on the BYJU'S IAS courses. The test will be held on 1st of May at 11 a.m. The last day to register is 30th of April and the deadline is 6 p.m. The link to register for this test also is given in the description of the video. Now let's begin our analysis with the first article that talks about the concept of death penalty. The author here is saying that it is time for the government of India and for the Supreme Court to come together and make sure that we ban the concept of death penalty in India. Because the earlier idea that death penalty should only be given in the rarest of the rare cases is not being followed. The author here is talking from the point of view of a Supreme Court order on April 22nd, where the Supreme Court decided that they would critically examine the abrupt ways in which the trial judges are often imposing death penalties throughout the country. The Supreme Court has said that they are anguished by the frequency at which the death penalty is now being awarded and they don't stand by it. Now, the Supreme Court very clearly said that one size fits all approach cannot be followed when it comes to death penalty. Every single case is different, and it is only in the rarest of the rare cases that the concept of death penalty can be awarded. We have seen in the past that at the Supreme Court level especially, the court has found out multiple reasons to not award death penalty to the convicts. These possible reasons have included social economic backwardness of the convict, the mental health, heredity issues, parenting issues, socialization, lack of education, etc. Now, the key point is that as per the Code of Criminal Procedure, whenever a judge in India gives capital punishment, the judge has to mention the special reasons because of which this punishment is being given. So it has to be clearly mentioned as a part of the judgment, and that is why it requires a lot of efforts on the part of the judge and on the part of the prosecution to prove that yes, this person deserves a death penalty and nothing else. Now, whenever we talk about the concept of death penalty in India, the one Supreme Court case that keeps on getting mentioned is the Bachchan Singh case, which is the Bachchan Singh versus the state of Punjab of 1980. This was a case in which the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court said that we should adopt a humane and reformist framework. That is, whenever a crime has been committed, the judges should think from the point of view of reforming the convict. They should not think from the point of view of ending the life of the convict. It is only in very rare cases should death penalty be awarded. But as per the author, after 1980, maybe for a few years the judiciary was very careful of not giving death penalty in many cases, but over the past couple of decades we have seen that awarding death penalty unfortunately has again become the norm rather than being an exception. And that is why it is time for the Supreme Court to step up again. Because whatever guidelines and whatever ideas that they had given in the Bachchan Singh case now seem to be obsolete, and the courts across the country need to be reminded of what exactly is the Supreme Court's view in this matter. Although the idea is that the Supreme Court can again release guidelines which clearly say that death penalty should be avoided. But as per the author, in the past it has not really worked well. Whenever the Supreme Court has come out with such kind of guidelines, the police and the government, both of them try to go against those guidelines, which have been seen in multiple cases. Let's take an example of the sedition law. The Supreme Court was very clear that the sedition law should only and only be imposed when there are circumstances which clearly indicate that the person is working against the nation. However, we have seen in the past few years that the interpretation of the law, such as the sedition law, has been done in such a way that a lot of people have been caught up under it and they have been sent to jail for long periods of time. So as per the author, just giving guidelines from the Supreme Court side might not be enough, as we have seen in the past as well. The other problem that we have to understand, and it is a worldwide phenomena, Wherever the death penalty is allowed in any of these countries, there are some key points that we need to take into consideration. Number one, death penalty is usually and majority of the times given to people who are poor, who are uneducated, and who are illiterate. The reason being that these are the people who do not have good legal assistance. So, even if their crime does not deserve a death penalty, just because their lawyers are not being able to argue their case in a good manner, they are the ones who end up being awarded the death penalty. And this is not just with India. This is a case with countries across the world. You see what is happening in US. There have been multiple studies conducted, and in the US, the number of people who are given death penalty, out of them, most are black, most are those people who come from poor backgrounds because they can't afford good legal aid. And that is a good enough reason for countries such as India to now make a law against death penalty as well. The author says that the court would have to revisit the Bachchan Singh case and again reiterate the fact that the right to life given under Article 21 cannot be taken away by the court. Across the world, as per the Amnesty International, there are 108 nations that have legally abolished death penalty, and it cannot be given in those countries. It is time for India also to join that particular group as per the author. Now, the debate for death penalty in India is a very old debate. Let me give you a bit of background about it. Now, interestingly, till 1955, the law in India was that death penalty in case of serious crimes was a rule and life imprisonment was actually an exception. Meaning that in most cases, whenever a person has committed a serious crime, the person was actually awarded a death penalty. In 1955, however, thankfully, the Criminal Procedure Code was amended and this provision was exchanged. Meaning that after the amendment of 1955, the courts were now told that life imprisonment should be the norm while death penalty should be an exception. Also, in 1973, the law again was amended and it said that courts will be required to give the reason in writing for awarding maximum penalty, that is a death penalty. And since then, the situation has changed. Since our independence, there are close to 720 people who have been executed in India for different offences. And if you look at the number of cases pending in India and the number of cases that have been adjudicated, this number is extremely small. So it is a good part that yes, death penalty is allowed in India, but still we are using it in a very rare manner, very sparingly. In fact, in many of the cases, death penalty was actually commuted by higher courts such as the Supreme Court for multiple reasons, which we have also seen in the past. And in fact, the latest of these examples came just last week, when the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence of a convict who murdered and raped a 4-year-old girl to life imprisonment, saying that this is not in the category of rarest of the rare cases. While this is what the Supreme Court said, you are free to take your side and you are free to choose whichever side of the argument that you are supporting right now. Now, let me also give you some examples of important Supreme Court judgments on this matter where they talk specifically about the concept of death penalty. There was the Jagmohan Singh versus the state of UP case of 1973, in which the Supreme Court said Article 21 says that your life cannot be deprived except by procedure established by law. Meaning that if a death sentence is given to you as per the procedure established by law, then this is not against the Constitution of India. And it cannot be said that death penalty in India is unconstitutional. Then came the Rajendra Prasad versus the state of UP case of 1979, in which the Supreme Court said that if murderous operation of a criminal jeopardizes a social security in a planned manner, then his or her right to life can be taken away and the person can be sentenced to death. So Supreme Court also has given different types of judgments. Then comes the Bachchan Singh case, which has been mentioned multiple times in this article. 1980 case in the Supreme Court was the case where Supreme Court said that it is only in the rarest of the rare cases that death penalty should be awarded. The rarest of the rare cases can be described as when a murder is committed in extremely brutal, ridiculous and diabolical, revolting or reprehensible manner, which is against the entire community. This is what the author wants the Supreme Court to reiterate once again. Also, this ethical question of whether or not death penalty should be abolished or not has been debated widely across the world and not just in India. If you visit the website of Amnesty International, it has a lot of data about the countries which still give death penalty. They also have a lot of numbers about how many countries have given how many death penalties in the past few years, where China leads all the other countries. The Amnesty International on their website gives these particular reasons because of which, according to them, death penalty should be abolished. Number one, they say that it is irreversible and some mistakes might happen. There have been cases where a person may be punished and may be awarded death penalty where the person was not even guilty. When you finish the life of a person, there is no chance to go back on the mistake that you have committed. For example, in US also there have been multiple instances of people who were on death row who were later released on the grounds of innocence. Second reason, according to Amnesty International, is it does not deter crime. The entire idea of having death penalty or having any punishment is to deter the crime from being happening in the future once again. And as per Amnesty International, it does not happen. What they have seen is the countries which have abolished death penalty do not have a higher crime rate as compared to those that do have death penalty. So this concept of frightening other people or deterring other people do not apply here. Third, it is often used within the skewed justice system. As I said earlier, the justice system in many countries across the world is not fair. There are many times when the police and the other people in the administration are under pressure and they catch anyone from the community, pressurize them into accepting a crime so that they can show results on the ground. In such cases, when a person is given death penalty, this is the worst kind of treatment that we can give to them. This is also discriminatory. As we discussed earlier, most of the people who are actually given these kind of punishments belong to minority community, belong to poor and illiterate classes, and that is a good enough indication that they don't get enough legal aid that they should. It is also used as political tool in many countries such as Iran and Sudan, where death penalty is misused specifically on political opponents. These are good enough reasons as per Amnesty International to do away with death penalty in a civilized world that we are living in right now. The next article is taking us back to what is happening in Myanmar. Now, we might have forgotten because Myanmar has not been in the news, but if you remember just a couple of years back, there was a military coup in Myanmar, where Myanmar has been ruled by the military, or as they are called in Myanmar, junta. Junta is pronounced as junta. So the reason why it is in the news once again is that the leader of Myanmar, the most famous political leader in the country right now, that is Miss Aung San Suu Kyi, has again been convicted of another crime of corruption in the court of Myanmar. The interesting part is that there has not been any evidence that has been given against her. There was just one government official that came up and said that yes, I gave her the bribe in exchange for certain favors, and on the basis of that, the army has again sent her to prison for a number of years. Now, the reason why it is done is that the army of Myanmar, while it is in power and has captured the entire country, is still very, very angry at the rising popularity of Aung San Suu Kyi, and they want to take as many actions against her as possible. Now, if you have been following Myanmar's history, you would know that Miss Aung San Suu Kyi had been in house arrest for a very, very long time. In fact, between 1989 and 2010, she spent 15 years under house arrest and was only released after a lot of international pressure from nations in Europe and US. After which there were elections and her party won a resounding victory which the military generals did not like. The reason was that military generals who have been in power in Myanmar for a very, very long time are used to a lot of luxuries in their life, are used to a lot of privileges that are given to them. But in 2015, when Miss Aung San Suu Kyi's party won the election, and in 2020 again when she had a lot of support and she would have won the election easily, the military was scared because they thought that their privileges will be taken away. That is why they took the opportunity to organize a military coup and ensured that whatever economic progress that the country had made under her is now taken back once again. The country is at the brink of a civil war right now because the opposition parties, that are the politicians, are again very, very angry with the military because they are not letting the country progress in any way whatsoever. While the Myanmar military think that this is how they can rule the country for a long time, but we all know how it has ended the last time also, and this model is not sustainable. Now, the reason that India is so much concerned about what is happening in Myanmar are multiple. First, obviously, Myanmar is one of those nations with which we share a large border. Not just any border, but border towards the northeast part of India, which has always been extremely sensitive. Secondly, it is an integral part of India's Look East policy, and that is why we are very concerned about what is happening in Myanmar. India also has a direct personal connection with Miss Aung San Suu Kyi. If you know, she did her graduation and her studies from India. In fact, she is a graduate from Delhi University's LSR, that is Lady Shriram College. So she has a direct connection with India, and that is why India has a moral responsibility of helping her and her government out against the military junta rule in the country of Myanmar. Now, as I said earlier, there are multiple reasons for India to be concerned about what is happening in Myanmar right now. Myanmar is a very significant country for India and is a part of India's two big plans, that is, Neighborhood First policy and also the Act East policy. India has also developed the Sitwe port in Myanmar's Rakhine state under what is called as the Kaladan Multimodal Project. As you know, this project gives India an alternate connectivity to our own northeastern part, under which we can reach the state of Mizoram through Myanmar just in case there is any adversity in the Siliguri corridor or in the Chicken's Neck. That is why peace and stability in Myanmar is of utmost concern to us. Now, ever since the military junta has taken over Myanmar once again, India has been very categorical in saying that we do not support this rule and we want to move towards democracy. Now, there are multiple challenges in front of India. Number one, India does support Aung San Suu Kyi and wants her to come out, but on the other hand, because Myanmar is so critical, we also cannot be very critical or we cannot take any step against the Myanmar military. The reason is that China has always had a major influence in Northeast insurgency. There has been historical accounts that whenever the Indian armed forces try to take action against the insurgents in the Northeast, many of them go to Myanmar and settle there. So we want the cooperation of the Myanmar government to tackle this insurgency problem, and that is why we can't be on bad terms with Myanmar. Then there's also the Rohingya issue. Now the problem is when Aung San Suu Kyi was in power, she was very silent about the Rohingya crisis. As you know, Rohingyas would originally belong to Bangladesh. Many of them were settled in Myanmar from where they were persecuted and they were forced to leave in large numbers. It was said that Aung San Suu Kyi, although she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, had a major role to play, and because her government was silent on the treatment given to the Rohingyas, that is why they fled to the other nations in the neighborhood, including India. So India needs a lot of support of Myanmar to settle the Rohingya issue as well. And because we share such a large border with Myanmar, which is about 1643 kilometers, a lot of it is porous also, we need to ensure that the relationship remains stable. We also have a special treaty with Myanmar under which some local tribes in the border area are allowed to cross the border till a certain number of kilometers, because there are tribes in India whose close relatives stay on the other side of the border, and the same is with the tribes that are living in Myanmar. Many of their relatives stay on the Indian side, and that is why on foot they can cross the border up till certain limit. That is why we need to have peaceful and stable relationship with Myanmar, irrespective of whoever is in power in the country right now. The next article is kind of an interview where the question that is being raised is the freebie politics culture that we have in India affecting the growth of India? Now this is because recently there was an address given by Mr. N.K. Singh, who was a chairperson of the 15th Finance Commission, where he warned that the state governments in India right now have been following the path of giving freebies all across the country. There are some governments that are offering free laptops, free cycles. Now there's a culture of offering free electricity up to a certain point of time. There's also culture now of offering free water. All that, as per Mr. N.K. Singh, is detrimental to our economic growth, and in the long run it will haunt us in a major way, and that is why this practice should curtail. Now this is the point on which the article is based, and there are two people who are giving their views about whether or not they agree with it or not. As per the people who are contributing to this article, there are different ways to look at it. The first way to look at it is we cannot just blame the state governments in India when the center government is also doing similar or even worse. Yes, we do have increasing number of states in India that are offering such kind of freebies. A culture that many people say started from the state of Tamil Nadu, where the Tamil Nadu government started offering different types of freebies to the people if they came to power. And now this culture has gripped the entire country. However, even when you see that, you would see that the fiscal deficit numbers for center government are much worse as compared to the state governments. The debt to GDP ratio at the center government level is reaching almost 90%, which is much higher than most of the states that we have in India. And that is why, rather than giving a sermon to the states in India that you should control your spending and you should not give freebies, the same lesson should actually be given to the center government, because they also do the same through their promises. Be it the promise of loan waivers, or be it the promise of free ration, etc. As per the authors, the center government should also bring in similar kind of fiscal discipline that they're expecting from the states. Also, just yesterday you would have seen how Prime Minister made a statement saying that the state governments should reduce taxes on petrol. This has again added fuel to the fire, because while you are expecting the state governments to curtail their taxes, the center government on the other hand is not doing the same. Anyways, after the GST has come into picture, the number of things on which the state governments can put taxes have reduced drastically. The state governments right now are increasingly dependent on the center government for generation of their revenues. So at this point of time, asking the state governments to be more fiscally disciplined is not really good for the center government. It is not great from the side of the central government. The author says that the central government has never been able to adhere to the fiscal deficit limits that have been mandated by the law, while there are certain states that have been able to do that. So the lesson is for the central government to learn more than the state government right now. Also, it depends on how you consider freebies. For example, the Delhi government, when they offer the free electricity up to certain units, they say that it would only be for the benefit of the poor people. Because if you consume electricity, let's say more than 200 units or more than 300 units, then you would have to pay the entire bill. So it is only when you're living in a very small household, when you don't have a lot of appliances, only and only then would you come under that particular bracket, and it is not for everyone. On the other hand, the people who support the center government say that the center government's decisions to waive off farmer loans or to give free food grains to the poor people, all of that has led to reduction in poverty. You would have seen the center government making claims that they have reduced the poverty of India by leaps and bounds. But as per the authors here, we can't believe that, because there is no official poverty estimate after 2011-2012. Yes, the welfare programs such as Manrega or the PDS, that is a public distribution system, would have definitely contributed to reduction in poverty. But we still don't have concrete numbers to believe that the freebie or the welfare done by the center government is good and the freebies or the welfare done by the state government is bad. How can the two not be the same? And why is it that you're only blaming the state governments and not the center governments? That is what their point of view is. Now, just to draw a connection outside the article here, one of the other reasons that we do have a lot of freebie culture in India is that we have a lot of frequent elections. Because we have so many frequent elections, we have elections for different states every single year, then we have the center government elections, that the political parties, whenever they go back to the people, they have to keep on offering something. Not just this, it is also because the people of India have a very short mentality. Let me give you an example. If the government of India says that now we will be giving 5,000 rupees or let's say 1,000 rupees to everyone every single month in India, everyone will be very happy and you will obviously vote for the government. But just think about it, from where exactly will the government get that money? The government will get that money from taxing you. The government does not have any other source of revenue. It will at the end of the day tax you, your activities, your income, etc. So ultimately it is you only who is paying for your own expenses. But just because you are thinking in the short term, just because we think that right now we are getting money from the government side in our bank account, we would obviously favor the government in power. A few years back, if you used to book railway tickets on the IRCTC website, the website very clearly said that IRCTC or railways is only taking 57% fare from you. That is, if the railways is spending rupees 100 on your ticket, they will only take rupees 57 from you. So the question is, from where exactly are they getting the remaining 43 rupees? The answer is you only. It is just that they are taking this money from you indirectly. They might add it in the transportation cost, in the cargo cost, but that would result in increasing inflation. Or the government will help the railways by infusing more money from the taxes that you have paid. So ultimately it is you only who is paying and no one else. But because we think in the short term, we always think that the freebies that are given to us are good and we vote in that manner on. So these are some of the reasons of why the freebie culture is rising. And why would it not? If I have a political party and I have seen that in the last election, whoever offered free things to the people, people voted for him only, then I will also offer one more free thing. I will say, okay, the other person is giving you a free bike. I'll give you free bike and free lifetime petrol also. If other person says that I'll give you a free laptop, I will say I will give you 2 laptops and an iPad also. Because I don't have to pay from my own pocket, right? I am paying from the government's expenses only. So that is what gives rise to the freebie culture. Also, because the political parties in many cases don't really have anything to show for their actual performance, they want to hide that fact and they want to close people's eyes by giving these freebies. And when one party does it, obviously other parties also follow the suit. Now, there are arguments in favor and against the freebie culture as well. Number one, at the end of the day, India is supposed to be a welfare state. A socialist welfare state where the government has a responsibility to ensure the welfare of the people living in the country, especially those who are poor and marginalized. This freebie culture or offering things for free is a step in that direction also. India also is one of the most unequal countries in the world, where income of 84% households declined in 2021, but at the same time the number of billionaires increased. So that also means that it is a big responsibility on the government's shoulder to make sure that they help those people who can't afford things themselves. On the other hand, there are obvious arguments against the freebie culture also. It goes against the spirit of democracy because at the end of the day, now you're not voting for who has done a better job, you're voting for who will give you more free things. So the concept of equal elections is now flawed because you're only voting for those who are in power. Let's say there's a government in power right now. Just 6 months before the election, they can start distributing a lot of things because they know the elections are coming. So it plays against the people who are fighting to come in power, that is the opposition parties. It results in fall of productivity because government also knows rather than working hard, they just have to announce freebies. It is a fiscal stress on the government's expenses. It discourages the honest taxpayer. People who do pay taxes are crying, why should I pay taxes when my money is going to waste and going free to the people? All in all, we should aim to reach that situation where the government would not really need to give any freebie and no one in the country would even require a freebie from the government's side. However, till then, it is a responsibility of the government to help at least those who can't afford it. The next article that we have is on a very interesting decision by the Tamil Nadu government. The Tamil Nadu government has said that the central government recently announced that they will be privatizing certain airports. Out of the list of those airports which the central government announced will be privatized, there are some airports in the state of Tamil Nadu also. Now, the Tamil Nadu government is saying if you look at schedule number 7, land belongs to the state. So if our airports are being given to any private company, means huge amount of land is given to the private companies. So either we want money in return or what we want is that these private companies who are taking over airports, we want a share in that. We want to be part owners of the airport. This is a policy released by the Tamil Nadu government and interestingly, states such as Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, majorly in bracket if you want you can write non-BJP ruled states, they have also supported the Tamil Nadu government saying that yes, if our airports are being privatized, if our land is being given away, we also want ownership of the airport partly because this belongs to us. Now this is an interesting problem because the airports have been privatized earlier as well, but at that point of time that problem did not arise. So the first airports to be privatized in India were Delhi and Mumbai starting with 2003 when they were supposed to be run in a public-private partnership model. Seeing the success of these airports, the UPA government under Dr. Manmohan Singh started to think that we should privatize more airports and give it to other companies, but they could not do it. Now when Modi government came to power in 2019, they privatized more airports on the same model. Lucknow, Ahmedabad, Jaipur, Mangalore, Tiruvananthapuram and Guwahati airports were also given in the PPP model. And then under the National Monetization Pipeline, that is the plan of the government to earn more revenue from the government resources, government announced that 25 more airports will be monetized. Now this is where the problem started because out of these 25 airports, 4 are from Tamil Nadu. Chennai, Coimbatore, Madurai, and Tiruchirappalli, also known as Trichy. This is where the Tamil Nadu government's new policy has come into the picture, that our land is not free, and if you have to give it to some other company, we deserve a part of the ownership. And this is a fair policy if you actually think about it, because the state governments anyway don't really have a lot of revenue sources left after the GST. So taking away huge chunks of land from them and not allowing them any ownership goes against common sense. But then there is another argument. The other argument is that even today, when the airports are under the Airport Authority of India, the state governments were not earning anything from that. So it's not that the center government is taking away money from the state governments and giving to the private sector. But what the state government is saying is that now, because center government will earn from privatizing these, why should we also not earn? If these airports were under central government earlier, then we are fine because government alone is earning. But now that private sector is coming in, then we also want some benefit from this particular deal. And that is how this policy has now come up. Just to give you a side note, many of these airports that were announced by the government to be privatized are not airports that make a lot of profit, because there are not a lot of flights that come there. Airports mostly earn money when the flights land on those airports, because then they have to pay a major sum. If the airplanes are parked, they pay a huge parking fee. If they have to land, if they have to take off, all of that means a lot of fee to be paid to the airport. So airport only earns money in proportion to the number of flights landing and taking off. So small airports where we don't really have a lot of flights don't really earn a lot of money. Many of them in fact have gone into losses. That is why the central government announced that whoever comes up from the private sector to take over airports such as Varanasi, Amritsar, Bhubaneswar, etc., we will give them control of some smaller airports kind of free of cost. So it's a clubbing offer that the central government is running, that if you take over a major airport, we will give you a smaller airport for free, which is mainly making a loss, so that maybe you can turn that around as well. Also, to understand, what Tamil Nadu government has done is just a policy, meaning that they can't force the central government to stop this privatization, or they can't force the central government to not go ahead with it. This is just one of those things where we have to see what the central government's approach is, whether they go in the direction of cooperative federalism and take the Tamil Nadu government's request on board, or whether they crush them and not even listen to them and go ahead with whatever their decision is, because legally the Tamil Nadu government cannot stop this from happening. The next article that we have here is about the Russian gas supplies in Europe. One of those things that we have been discussing multiple times ever since the Ukraine-Russia crisis has started. The reason, however, today that we are discussing it is that Russia has announced that we are stopping gas supplies to two major European countries, Bulgaria and Poland. Why? Because Russia had said that if you want to buy gas from us, you have to pay us in ruble, that is our currency. And Poland and Bulgaria have not done so. They have still been paying in euros and dollars, and Russia is not accepting that. And that is why finally Russia is saying that we will not supply gas to you anymore. Interestingly, the two countries are saying that this is a breach of contract, because the original contract that was signed talked about payments in dollars and euros only. So all of a sudden, in the middle of it, you cannot change the contract. But Russia, as you know, right now it's not really in a mood to listen to contracts and legal languages, and they have abruptly stopped the supply of gas to these two nations. While both of these are highly dependent on Russia for their gas, the problem will be more for Bulgaria, since it gets about 3/4 of its natural gas from Russia. It is also the cheapest source of energy for most of the European countries. While Poland, on the other hand, has already been making alternative arrangements and might get certain help from Germany, Bulgaria, on the other hand, would have to see what alternative sources do they have right now. Now, there's a backstory about that also, because these are not the only two countries that are not paying Russia in ruble. In fact, out of all the European countries, the news says that only 4 countries have accepted to pay Russia in rubles, while others still have not. So why is it that decision has been taken against Poland and Bulgaria only? The reason is their statements on Ukraine. Poland, for example, has been a major supplier of military hardware to Ukraine. They in fact announced that they will be sending tanks to Ukraine in the ongoing conflict. On the other hand, Bulgaria also has been very critical of Moscow and have supported the Western countries' sanctions against Russia. Not just this, they have even hosted the fighter jets from NATO on its Black Sea coast, which does not go according to the plan of Russia, and that is why they are especially angry at these two European nations. Now, since this is a major problem, what exactly can Europe do, and what is the present situation? If you look at Europe right now, their natural gas mainly comes from three sources: Russia, Norway, and Algeria. Now, since Russia is out of the picture, they have to be dependent on Norway and Algeria. Now, the question is, can these two fulfill the shortfall that will happen because of Russia backing out? The answer, as per many experts, is no. Europe is highly dependent on import of natural gas since it is the cleanest and the cheapest source of energy that they can have. The long-term strategy that Europe is thinking is to import liquefied natural gas, it is LNG from US and from the Middle East, but it will be much tougher. Number one, because they don't have enough infrastructure for that amount of LNG import as they used to have for natural gas import from Russia. Also, liquefied natural gas requires massive facilities and container ships which require huge capital investment. And Europe, which has been very comfortable in dealing with Russia over the past few decades, does not want to now go ahead and chart a new path once again. On the other hand, the problem is similar for Russia as well. It's not just with Europe. Russia also is highly dependent on the money that they earn from the export of their natural gas. So by cutting down supply to Poland and Bulgaria, they are also taking a big risk. They are hoping that this will make the other countries fall in line and arrange rubles. Now, the reason why Russia wants them to pay them in rubles is because in that case, Poland and Bulgaria will try to buy ruble from the international market, which will increase the demand of ruble and which will increase the power of the Russian ruble currency. This is a big bet that Vladimir Putin is making right now because Russian economy is heavily dependent on the oil exports and makes 40% of its revenue from natural gas export to Europe only. That is why the implications of this decision in the long run remain to be seen from both the sides. Now, if you look at this map of Europe, which is published by Al Jazeera, you would see that countries in Europe are dependent on Russia to a different extent when it comes to supply of natural gas. There are bordering countries of Russia such as Latvia, which are 100% dependent on the Russian natural gas. Then there is Poland and then there is Bulgaria, on which this action has been taken right now. As you can see, the nations that are most at risk because of this change in heart of Vladimir Putin are the ones that are highly dependent on natural gas on Russia. Czech Republic, there is Germany here, then we also have Slovakia, Hungary. Hungary, although has a pretty good relationship with Russia, with their leader almost being a dictator. On the other hand, the other nations which do not really have reliance on Russia include Sweden, Belgium, France to a certain degree, and then we have Spain, Portugal, etc. Also, if you look at the quantity of natural gas that is exported from Russia to these nations, Germany is hands down the country that is most dependent on Russia. We have discussed about this multiple times earlier as well, how Germany has been ramping down its nuclear power production, making it more and more dependable on Russia for its natural gas import. That is why Germany especially was very soft on Russia days before the war had started, and they were not very keen on taking much action against Russia anyway. Also, as I said, multiple media houses across the world are now arguing that in the long run, there is no good solution in mind for Europe. The LNG gas that they're hoping to get from US and from the Middle East can be a short-term solution but not a long-term solution as per the experts. These are the articles we wanted to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number one, proscribing death penalty is an essential feature of a civilized society. Do you agree? Discuss. Second, freebie culture in Indian politics stems from the idea of making India a welfare state. Elaborate. Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.